I think we should be worried. It's no secret that the Chinese have been building up their military forces. We know that President Xi has, for example, spoken about the China's military being able to retake Taiwan from 2027. In his view, retake it and rejoin it to the mainland. So it's clear they've got some military ideas anyway. And now to extend the saber rattling to the US, which would obviously be involved in any fight in Taiwan anyway, is rather concerning because it suggests that the sort of militaristic mood in Beijing is ramping up, not ramping down.
But they were going to respond to this rhetoric from Trump. I mean, I know that in order to do this is how Trump does a deal.
I don't think we would expect any country to say, well, we're preparing for a military fight with you because you've increased tariffs on us. And I think, that's not been the case with other countries who have hit back at the US quite rightly in their view from, with tariffs. They've gone economically, they've gone in that kind of mode. They've even perhaps reciprocated with greater economic challenges. I think what's different here is that the Chinese have brought other forms, if you like, of warfare into the context. And that seems to me quite a escalatory move from China, and not one that's likely to lead to a deal emerging from Washington.
So should we take the word war literally to mean some kind of military intervention, or is it just some kind of vernacular that may have been lost in translation?
Well, of course, it might be the latter, but when China says, according to the translation, it's a tariff war, a trade war, or any other type of war, it's kind of difficult to see what they might have meant if it wasn't military in that kind of way. And again, it ties in, I think, very importantly, ties in to this idea about Taiwan. As you know, as we all know, America has been, if you like, the backstop for Taiwanese security for a long time, and China's aware of that. There have been numerous wargaming sort of mechanisms that have gone in to look at what a conflict would look like over Taiwan. They all involve the US getting dragged in because of its allies being dragged in the same way. And so when China does mention any type of war, it's obviously fitting into other facts into their constellation. That means that we should take this as being a very veiled, or not even so veiled, an open threat, as it were, to resort to military action.
Could they argue perhaps that they were just responding not quite in kind? I suppose maybe back to the translation issue there, but the way in which Trump does business, this is the way that they're going to do business.
But again, it's difficult to see why China would pick a fight in this way with the US. Yes, they want to be obviously putting their point of view across strongly, but to leave your words open to that kind of interpretation would, again, seem to be a big escalation in this kind of debate. There were plenty of ways they could have construed a statement if they wanted to make one that didn't lend itself to the kind of conversation we're having today. The very fact that they did that suggests they had that in mind, at least wanting that to be a topic of conversation at the very least.
So what sort of response can we expect from Donald Trump?
Well, I think it's important to note that one of the prime motivations of the Trump administration is to look at how to counter China. A lot of what they're doing across the world is about looking at how do you curtail and counter Chinese influence. So it's unlikely that Donald Trump is going to look at this and go, well, I'm going to back away from my economic plans for China, or indeed any other plans I've got to curtail Chinese influence, because as far as he's concerned, China and the US are engaged in a fight, as it were, for global influence and for resources and everything else that goes with it. So he's not going to back down. Obviously, he's not somebody who's wanting to start wars. He's been quite open about not starting wars. I would imagine that he will probably, sort of bat this one off and just go, well, say what you like, I'm still going to do what I'm doing. And as to use his favourite phrase of last week, I've got all the cards here because I'm going to hurt you more than you can hurt me. So I think, we shouldn't expect necessarily any precipitate action from the White House in response. But if the Chinese continue down this vein, there's a limit to what they can expect to happen without further retaliation, as it were. And I think economically, again, from the Americans, not militarily. The point of this is that obviously a lot of Chinese goods come into the US, but a lot of, China holds a lot of American debt. There's all sorts of things they could do financially that could cause problems for America in that regard. And of course, there is trade going both ways in terms of finished products coming back to China as well. So the reality is that, trade wars, as most people recognize, tend to be damaging for both parties who engage with them. It's very rare that you get one side just emerging out of it as a clear victor. Obviously what we've we've seen in the past is that the US does indeed, as you alluded to earlier, use tariffs now under Trump as a mechanism for getting deals in preferential arrangements. And in the past, tariffs have, of course, come off once those deals have been made. So the question is, how quickly do deals get made? Do they get made before serious damage occurs to the American and Chinese economies, or do they actually drag out into a full-scale trade war, which would end up being damaging to both parties?